Dear students, today we will discuss about the spin-spin coupling, which is very important topic as far as NMR spectroscopy is concerned. You remember in the previous, just before working out few problems, I have given 4 points about NMR. The 4 point, one of the point, so from the spin-spin coupling, we get some additional information. That additional information is like, how many neighbors are there. That information we get from this spin-spin coupling. And also from the coupling constant, we get to know what kind of a bond it is, how far it is, certain information we get it. So it is really important subject. So let us try to learn about this topic today. And today and then tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So hopefully that will this topic will take 3 lectures. Hopefully within 3 lectures I'll be able to finish this task. Okay, so what is spin-spin coupling? If you see the any NMR spectrum, so far the discussion what I mentioned was like, so you will get a peaks if you have a n number of magnetically active nucleus. So those will give accordingly these NMR signals. So that is what I have mentioned. But there is something that is very important to know, that the NMR, the real NMR spectrum, it is like a cluster of peaks. It is not like a single peak. It will appear like a cluster of peaks. Okay. Why I'm saying cluster? So these are two singlets I'm drawing, and then just to give you some feeling, then I'm trying to draw. So what is cluster, right? So the real NMR spectrum, as you know, that it is a plot of x-axis chemical shift delta in ppm. It is increasing in this fashion, and y-axis is the intensity. On the right hand side, we have the TMS signal that is at 0. We will set it. So all these things, NMR signals, actually they don't appear like a single peak. Instead, they appear very closely spaced lines. So these behavior, what we call it as a fine structure. So fine structure we see in the case of NMR spectroscopy. NMR spectral lines are basically splitted, and then we see the fine structure. So what is the reason for splitting? The reason for splitting is basically the spins interact. That is the reason. The spins, magnetically active nuclei, spins will interact. Probably in the second semester, you would have studied the EPR spectroscopy or ESR or EPR spectroscopy. You know that the electron interact with each other, and then accordingly they split each other, right? Electron interact with the nuclei, so they accordingly we see, instead of one peak, we see many peaks. That depends upon how many nuclei are present. Likewise, here also the same, that the nuclei, one nuclei, if it is a magnetically active, and nearby in the vicinity, if you find, if that nuclei finds another nuclei, it basically splits, right? So that is what is referred to as spin-spin coupling. Okay, the extent of the coupling, to what extent they couple each other, that is decided by the spacing, that spacing between the two fine structure peaks. For example, in this case, it is what this is called. There are three closely spaced peaks are there, so we call it as a triplet. Okay, small t we represent with a small t. So this triplet, if you just expand and see that the spacing, what is the spacing between these uh, lines, is something that we call it as a coupling constant, right? How much they split it. It is a little or it is more. That is what I mean by the extent of coupling is represented with in terms of a coupling constant. Okay, so the coupling constant is represented with a symbol Z. Okay, the coupling constant is represented with the symbol Z, and its units are Hertz. Okay, so we will learn more about it, but let's see the basics before that. And what kind of information we get? Coupling constant, coupling constant identify the number of nuclei which are in the vicinity. Okay? So how much it will split, that depends upon how many neighbors that it is having. Suppose you are concentrating on this particular nuclei. So how many lines this particular signal will be splitted? It is supposed to show one signal, but in the vicinity it has another one. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. So it is basically near about 3 bonds. So there is another magnetically active. So therefore, this one will split it into double. So that means that by looking at the fine structure, we can tell how many number of nuclei are present, right? By looking at, suppose if you see a triplet, that means it has two neighbors. That's how it basically splitting into two. Okay, so that information we get. Basically, there is a formula that 2ni. In the case of EPR also, you will have studied this formula 2ni plus 1. The splitting is determined by the fine structure is determined by this formula. Suppose if a nuclei is having n number of nuclei in the vicinity with a spin quantum number I, then accordingly it will split. Suppose if in the case of proton, this is half spin, so this half cancel out, and then therefore it is governed by, in the case of proton NMR, it is governed by n plus 1 rule. Okay, therefore it is governed by n plus 1 rule, and a proton, if it is having one uh, magnetically active magnetically active nuclei in the vicinity, then it will split it into two. Right, it will seen as a doublet. That's what I said, that it is having one proton. Therefore, one, if you replace one here, then you will see a doublet. Suppose if it is three are there, for example, this particular group is a methyl. In such a situation, this proton will have a three protons are there, and then you have to replace n with 3, and then it will be a quartet. Right. So that is what the so essentially, what we get the information is this: that by looking at the fine structure, we'll be able to determine what kind of and how many neighbors are there. Okay, how many neighbors are there? That information we get. Okay, so the position is determined by this position, right? So this will tell you is a vinylic proton or aromatic proton or aliphatic proton or acetylenic proton. The position, these are positions, right? So this position is one information. The additional information is that, okay, in this case, okay, in this particular, there is a one proton at this region is resonating. That's why we see a peak, and then it is a triplet. That means it have two neighbors. That is the information that we get additionally from this spin coupling. Okay, now you can see here some of the very common the multiplicity patterns. You can see there is a doublet. The doublet is missing here. That if n is equal to 1, we get basically a doublet. And n is equal to 2, we get a triplet. And n is equal to 3, we get a quartet. Then pentet, sextet, septet, nonet. Likewise, we get different peaks. But usually these are theoretical names. But then whatever you get beyond a pentet, usually we call it as a multiplet. Even quartet also, sometimes if you see the second order effects, normally we say it is a multiplet instead of calling as a quartet, right? Because you don't see really a quartet feature in most of the cases due to the second order effects. And we started calling anything that beyond triplet nature, we call it as a multiplet. We don't see this thing. But in the some of the cases where the second order effects are less, okay, so then we see a nice fine structure. Okay, most of the real situations, what we call it as M. So anything if you can't really determine distinguish a quartet or pentet, we call it as a multiplet. Okay, and then the magnitude of the coupling constant identifies the coupling partner. Okay, so this how much it is split up based on the number of the value of the J, the coupling constant J, we will be able to tell certain information like what is the dihedral angle, is there any hydrogen bonding, how many intervening bonds are there between those things, and what type of nuclei it is, whether it is a homonuclei coupling or heteronuclear coupling. So there are many information that we can get it. Okay? Now the question is that whether the coupling is a through bond or through space. Well, the coupling is, in this case, the coupling is through, not through the space, but through it is bond, not through the space. For example, why it is not through the space? It is very simple that in the solution phase NMR, the nuclei are keep on changing their position and their, I think I forgot the name, yeah, tumbling motion. So a molecule which is dissolved in the deuterated solvent makes the motion what is referred to as the tumbling motion, and because of this the tumbling motion, that it doesn't find within the time scale of the detector, NMR detector, it doesn't find a partner which is nearby stable configuration. Okay, it may find a fraction of second, but then within the lifetime it goes to somewhere else because it is continuously changing because of the tumbling motion, right? So unless a particular proton which is sitting here in the molecule, it sees sufficiently, it sufficiently interact with a longer time with the neighboring partner, it doesn't show any coupling, right? So therefore, because of it is understood that because of this tumbling motion, the coupling is ruled out. Okay, we should not see it because of the tumbling motion. In reality, we should not expect any coupling, right? So, but in reality, what is happening? We are seeing a splitting. That clearly tells us that it is through bond. Okay, the coupling, spin-spin coupling is through bond. That is what I want to convey the message to you. Only then this is possible. If it is through space, okay, if it is through space, the tumbling motion time scales are much faster than it is of the picoseconds time scale they are interacting, whereas the NMR detection scales are of the order of microsecond. So within that, it's a very long time. Okay, very fastly. I mean, you know that the Brownian motion, very fastly the molecules are changing from one place to the other place. Okay, therefore it doesn't get enough time to interact with the neighboring spin nuclei, and naturally we don't expect it. Okay, because of that. But still, you are seeing in reality that the spin-spin coupling and the fine structure, therefore, it clearly indicates that it is not through the space, but rather it's through bond. Okay, as you must remember. And then there is a mechanism, what is referred to as the polarization mechanism, which really explains how this interaction is taking place. Okay, these are I think I will not go to the too much detail, but then very few details I can give you how these things are happening. And there is a mechanism what is referred to as the polarization mechanism, which explains the spin-spin coupling in the NMR spectroscopy. Right? In the normal situation, okay, if okay, so a nuclei, if it is not a magnetically active, and the electron doesn't interact with the nuclei, it is quite obvious, right? The electrons is we know that it is having spin, and if the nuclei is not having any spin, then definitely these spins will not interact. It is quite obvious in that situation. So the spin coupling is ruled out. That means the fine structure in those situations we don't see. So when do you see? We see spin coupling only when there is a uh, nuclei which is basically having a spin which is non-zero, then definitely we will see interaction between the spins, and then accordingly it will the energy levels get separated, and then accordingly we'll see splitting, and then accordingly we'll see a transition, and accordingly we see the fine structure, right? So this is what it is. In the second case, you can see with a nuclear spin, and then electron spin. So here you can see this small thing is a nuclei, and this small thing is also nuclei. Okay, so there are two nuclei, in between that you have a bonding electrons. Now I'm saying that my nucleus is a spin active. If this is if my nucleus is spin active, then there is a chance of coupling. That's what I mean. Okay. Now you know that there are different ways that one can see. Polarization mechanism basically tells you one thing, like if the nuclei is suppose, let's say that your nuclei is a half spin. Okay, if it is a half spin, that the nuclei can be pointed upward or downward. It depends upon how you take it. It doesn't matter. If the nuclei is half, then definitely the bonding electron, one of the bonding electron, which is close to that, this can be kept downward. And then accordingly, if it is downward, the bonding electron, in order to maintain the Pauli exclusion principle, the other electron has to be up. Okay, so therefore this is one configuration. Okay, therefore this is one configuration. And the other possibility is that the nuclear spin is up, and then the other case, the electron spin can also be up, while the other can be down. As you can see here, that uh, the spin of the nuclei, okay, is basically is with regard to this electron, it is opposite. Therefore, in this case, this energy state will be higher in energy, and other here the electrons are basically in the in this case, the electrons and the electron spin and the nuclear spin are parallel. Therefore, it is lower in energy. And there is another system that you can think of. Similarly, similar explanation can be given. And if you have a both the nuclei which are spin active, okay, so that is the case of where one nuclei is spin active. In the other case, that the two nuclei can be spin active. In such a situation, we come across this kind of configuration where the electrons, where the nuclei spin, where the nuclei spins are opposite, right? You can see that the nuclear spin are opposite, and such a configuration will be stable. And where the nuclear spins are anti-parallel, parallel with each other, such a configuration will have a higher energy, right? So these are two different possible situations that we can come across in the case of two nuclei which are having the half spin uh, magnetic moment, right? So what happens is that these things actually get interacted and then get separated in the magnetic field, and additionally the transition to such energy levels is possible. Therefore, we can see the splitting. Okay, so the spin state is sent through bond, resulting in a higher or lower energy. Therefore, accordingly, we can get uh, the splitting pattern. Okay, so for example, if you consider that you have a two nuclei, both are half spin nuclei. Let us say, for example, okay, we just take an example that you have a one system. So the one system half spin means that it can be pointing upward or it can be pointing downward. So therefore, there is one state that it is possible that you can arrange the alpha beta. Please remember that alpha state is a pointing upward spin, and beta state is a pointing downward. Okay, right. So one spin state can be arrived at by writing this configuration. One is up, one is down. Whereas the alpha can be down. Okay, the first nuclei spin can be down. That means the beta spin, and the other nuclei, that is, this can be upward. Okay, just imagine that you have a two spin, two protons, and both are, we know that is a half spin. Okay, you can think like this is a spin state of a left side nuclei proton, and then this is a spin of a right side proton. Okay, now we just these are the two different possible situations where the left hand side spin can be upward direction, while the right hand side proton can be downward direction. So this is one configuration. On the other hand, you can have the other configuration like this, and then in between, apart from these two states, we can also have the other situation where the two spins are pointing upward direction, while the two spins are pointing downward direction. So these are clearly shown here. And then, as you know, that the other proton is a proton, and there is another proton that is also having alpha beta. So nevertheless, the energy state of alpha beta and beta alpha both will be same. It is quite obvious, right? Whereas the alpha spin state, according to the energetics, so alpha spin is in the ground state, because we are pointing upward, we are applying the magnetic field this direction. Therefore, this is taken as this one, and then this will be lower in energy, whereas the beta beta spin will be higher in energy. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that, so if only one spin is there, if they are not interacting, then this discussion is not there. But the situation came because the other partner is there, the other partner is also having spin. Therefore, they start coupling with each other. As a result, you can see that additional energy levels have come in. In the usual situation, you have only one alpha. Okay, in the usual situation, you have a alpha and beta, and then transition happens here, and then we get one spectrum, one peak. But here, how many energy states are? This is one energy state, and this is another state. Now, The transition from this alpha alpha to alpha alpha to beta beta to beta alpha to beta beta, and then alpha beta to beta. So these are the four possible transitions are possible, and as a result, what we get is actually splitting. Okay. Some general spin-spin coupling features are summarized here. I already mentioned that the spin-spin interaction is taking place through bond, and as a result of which we see the fine structure. Okay, and the spacing in heads, okay, it is a constant. The spacing between the fine structure peaks can be measured, and that we represent with a J, and the units are hertz. Okay, and units are hertz. I must also tell you here that there is a correct notation. This is not the correct notation. There is another correct notation. Usually here we write in the bottom HH. What do you mean by HH? So this is the coupling constant of two protons. HH means the proton. Suppose if I write CH here, then that means the coupling is between the a carbon 13 nuclei and then the proton, right? So this is a simple the homonuclear coupling constant J. Okay. Now there is another number also we come across in the NMR data, whatever it is represented most of the scientific research papers. That is the number of bonds. Okay. So the number of bonds which are separated is represented generally here. So is 3 H H. So what do I mean by this? Okay, what do I mean by this? So this is a 3-bond coupling constant. That means these two protons are separated by 3 bonds, 1 to 3, right? And that number is something they represent for some value, let's say 10 hertz, like that they represent. So it is hertz. Now the question is, how do we measure this coupling constant? You may ask me that, sir, okay, fine, but how do we record it? Experimentally, it's very simple. That, let's say that you can take the coupling constant like this. Okay, the difference need to be measured. For example, when you measure here, let's say it is a 7.01. Okay, this is 7 point. This one is let's suppose 6.98. Okay, and this one will be 7 point. Okay, 7.03. Okay, 7.03. So what is the difference? How do you measure the difference? It's just you take that this is 7.01 and this is 7.98. So what is the difference? It is 0.03, right? So it is 0.03 ppm. This is ppm, and it need to be converted into hertz. How do we do that? Actually, the coupling constant represented with the hertz. So we know that ppm is a parts per million. How do we convert it? To convert into the hertz, it is just nothing that this number, whatever you get the difference, it need to be multiplied with the frequency of the operating NMR operating spectrometer. For example, I told you that NMR spectrometers are referred with the operating principle of the proton. For example, if you are recording a spectrum on 400 megahertz, okay, if you are using a 400 megahertz, then the 400 you have to multiply with the 400. Okay, megahertz means it is megahertz, right? So mega means 10 power 6. So 10 power 6, and then ppm. Already I told you that the ppm means the parts per million. It is 10 power minus 6. So this minus 6 and then 10 power 6 both get cancelled out, and then whatever you multiply the 400 into 0.03, it actually gives you the coupling constant, right? So actually this is of this kind. 400 into megahertz means 10 power 6, right? And the difference what we got is like into 0.03 ppm. ppm means instead of writing ppm, we have to write parts per million. 1 million means 10 power minus 6. So this minus 6 and this plus 6 get cancelled out, and then this is 400 multiplied by 3. So this actually is the the coupling constant of that particular triplet, right? So this is how we actually experimentally determine the coupling constant. Right? When you get the NMR spectrum, so there is in the software itself, we can just this everything is automatic nowadays. So, most of the NMR spectrometer comes with a customized software, and the software itself, if you want to measure the coupling constant, there is an option. You can choose the triplet or quadruplet, whatever you like it, so it measures and it gives you. Okay, it's very straightforward thing. And I must tell you that the coupling constants are independent of the magnetic field strength. Okay, it is independent of the magnetic field strength. Why? Because the uh, the uh, the chemical shifts are already independent, right? So chemical shift values, it doesn't change with the magnetic field strength. Therefore, the coupling constants also don't change it, right? Coupling constant don't change with respect to the operating frequency of the NMR spectrometer. And then some cases, the multiple coupling interactions may also exist. That means, you have one nuclei, and then nearby you have another. For example, you have CH2, and in the middle, and then right side and left side you have carbon. Now here, that on the left hand side carbon, that you have two nuclei, and the right hand side you have four nuclei. So look, 3 plus 4, it is like a 7 nuclei are interacting with this center CH2. So that is what meant by the multiple coupling. So at a time, the spins, many spins can interact with the one spin. As a result of which, the fine structure get complicated, and what we get is very complex spectrum. That's a complex a cluster of peaks, which you cannot say it's a multiplet, or it's a quadret, or a quintet, or a sextet, or none. Okay, so that's the problem with, as the number of neighboring coupling nuclear increased. Accordingly, the complexity of the splitting pattern increases, and such a situation we don't call really the quadret or quintet or anything. Instead, we call it as a multiplet. Okay, so usual coupling constant can range from 1 bond to the 5 bond, but there are very few cases where the long range coupling also seen. Okay, I told you that very clearly, that the coupling is happening through the bond. Therefore, as the bond, if somebody is very far, you cannot, you don't expect this nuclei to interact with such a nuclei which is very far. Since it is through bonds, as the number of the bonds increases between the two nuclei, definitely they don't interact effectively. Therefore, in most of the cases, what we come across is the coupling between one bond, two bond, three bonds are very common, very common. But beyond that, okay, sometimes it happens. But beyond 5 months, very rarely. Okay, but despite of all this general observation, there are many examples here, the long range couplings. So I will give you an example maybe in the coming slides, where the 9th bond coupling is also possible, 9 bonds. So there is a one or two molecules I have. I will show you those things. Okay. Okay, so the larger range couplings usually occur through aromatic system or in the conjugated system. Otherwise, this is absolutely not possible. Coupling between heteronuclear and homonuclear spin pairs is quite obvious, and as we know that if provided that the heteronuclear must also be the spin active, otherwise we don't see any kind of coupling. Okay, so 1 bond, 2 bond couplings are shown here. CH coupling, this is 1 bond. Okay, it's very difficult to measure the 1 bond coupling, mm, and then the 3 bond coupling, and this is called vicinal coupling, and this is the 4 bond meta hydrogens bonding with the 4 bond, and then para, you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 bond coupling, para proton interaction. In the case of benzene ring, you can just imagine like a uh, 5 bond coupling. Okay, so this is just to understand this, how these things are actually happening, how the spins are getting split. Okay, so for the in the case of two nuclei which are having half spin, that I already given the explanation. There is another one. Suppose if you have a 3 nuclei, It's not a one nuclei, but if it is a three nuclei in the vicinity. So how these spins, different spin energy levels get arises, and how these transitions are happening. If you want to understand, this particular diagram will be very much helpful. In the case of two nuclei, this is very straightforward. That the one, you can see that the blue one or a greenish one, it is pointing upward, while the other one is pointing downward. And in this case, the blue one is here, blue one is, both are down. So this is beta beta state. This is alpha beta state, and then this is another, both are in the other state. So the transitions are possible between these two and these two. As a result, we can get different two peaks. That is the explanation I gave you on the previous slide also. So we are not worried, we are not very much interested in that, because that is such a simple system. But let us go and then see such little complicated, where you have a three nuclei. So the three nuclei, and depending once again that all the cases we are discussing half spin nuclei based on another. If it is a one spin, then the discussion will be totally different, and all these diagrams will be totally different. So let us confine our discussion only to the half spin nuclei. The half spin nuclei can be arranged in different configurations. Different configuration. What are those things? So you can see that all the three can be pointing upward direction along with the field direction, right? That is one configuration. On the other hand, these spins can be downward. Okay. On the other hand, the spins can be downward. Okay. So here, two spins can be upward. Okay, so in this configuration, you can see that the two spins are upward, while the one spin is downward. And this configuration, two spins are basically downward, and then one spin is pointing upward. And this is the last configuration. Similarly, in the excited state also, you can write down. So this is a alpha 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 state. The excited state also can be written, and then accordingly, so these are different possible transitions quantum mechanically allowed, and then accordingly you will get a quartet signal. Why you get the quartet signal? It is because of this reason. Okay, you have different energy levels, and then the transitions are possible accordingly. Right? And then this is what is basically referred to. This is what it is referred to as the J coupling constant, and this is also J. And please remember that J is whether you take the difference between these inner lines or the outer line, doesn't matter. J must be same. Okay, so in the case of equivalent chemical equivalent protons, we get the coupling constant the same in all the cases. Okay, so this is a simple interpretation or explanation for suppose if you have a nuclei, and if it is seen three different nuclei, and these are different configuration by which we can arrange the nuclei, and then accordingly, so the spin state will split, the energy levels will split, and then the additional transitions are possible. And then, as we expected, and then we get different. We get the spin fine structure. Okay, this is the same thing that I have already finished, and there is nothing I can discuss. Now the question is very interesting. What is the intensity of the splitted line? This I did not touch upon, but let me tell you that the intensity of the peaks. I told you that the individual NMR peaks will be splitted, right? So the intensity is something that I just want to share. The intensity of NMR peak, these splitted lines follow the Pascal triangle. Okay, follow the Pascal triangle. Suppose if you come across a doublet, just a simple example, that let us assume that we have one proton and nearby carbon atom, so we have another proton, let's say, and it will basically split it into doublet according to the n+1 rule, and the intensity in this case will be 1:1. That means you see equal intensities of this splitted line. Okay, so this alone a single data. This alone a single peak. Now, in normal situation, if there is no spin-spin coupling, then this is what you see. Very intense one you see. Okay, but if there is a if both nuclei are interacting with each other and if both are the magnetically active, then what we see is a splitting doublet, and doublet intensity ratio. You see that now I have drawn intensity ratio will be 1:1. Okay, suppose let's suppose we have two nuclei. Okay, in that case, what we see is a triplet. The triplet intensity ratios is 1:3:3, right? 1:3:3 according to the Pascal triangle, right? So the peak intensities we can easily understood in terms of the Pascal triangle. Okay, why the intensity? Why such a way it is splitted? These are all It is all because of the arrangement. It is all because of the arrangement. You can just see it here. Uh, the case of a proton which is surrounded by three protons. How many possible arrangements are there? This is one. Okay. How many possible arrangements are there? Here, alpha alpha, there is one possible. Alpha alpha alpha, only one possible. Beta beta beta, only one possible. What about the other possible? There are three uh, states, degenerate state, where the two nuclei are basically pointing upward, and while the other one is pointing down. So these are that configuration, right? Just imagine, which is the alpha spins are lower in energy, beta spins are higher in energy. So in this case, two spins are pointing upward direction, while the other one is pointing. Sorry, two spins are pointing downward direction. The one is upward, right? So this is slightly higher in energy, and naturally the three spins are pointing downward will be lower in energy. So you can see this. 1:1, 1:1, 3:1. So this is 3. There are three possible degenerate states are there, which are identical in energy. So the intensity ratios actually came from there. Okay? So the number peak intensity ratios, expected peak intensity ratio, are actually following the Pascal triangle. Okay. Now I must also tell you there are very few cases where the NMR coupling constant can be negative also. That we will discuss maybe in the coming slides. Okay. Uh, so what are some here I summarize some of the common coupling rules. Equivalent nuclei do not interact. What do you mean by equivalent nuclei? What do you mean by equivalent nuclei? For example, I have a methyl group. And as far as methyl group, that there is a carbon, and on the carbon we have three protons, right? So as far as the methyl group is concerned, the three protons are said to be equivalent, okay, and they do not interact. But when do we see the interaction? The interaction generally happens non-equivalent one. So what is the non-equivalent on? So on the same carbon atom, you will say that all the protons are equivalent. But if you want to do, and then they do not interact. Even though they are magnetically active, protons are magnetically active, they don't interact because of the very fast rotation of the methyl group. Okay, so they are said to be equivalent, and then they do not interact. Okay? But on the adjacent carbon, suppose you have a CH2. So these are different protons. Chemically, they are protons, and methyl group protons also protons. But these, as far as this methyl group is concerned, these two protons are said to be non-equivalent. Okay, so they are present in a different environment, and then they are said to be non-equivalent. And then non-equivalent protons get interact with each other, and only then only such protons will give you the fine structure. Okay, so this is point number one. And this other point we already discussed, as the separation increases between the two nuclei that we are assuming or that we are interested to study, then the coupling between them actually decreases. And then the multiplicity, we can use this formula n plus 1 rule. Suppose that is point number 3. And point number 4, and multiple spin system. Suppose if you have a one nucleus surrounded either side different non-equivalent nuclei, then we can use this formula. And this formula is quite simple to derive, that 2ni a plus 2ni. So for example, that one side it has a nuclei, okay, other side it has a b nuclei. Let's suppose 2ni 2nb I plus 1. That means that you can just imagine that this situation. Okay, so it's having, let's say, 3H3, and this side it is having, let's say this is a, okay, so this side it is having 2 nuclei, the other side is it's having 3 nuclei. So, and we can use simplified, and since the protons are half nuclei, and then we can easily simplify it, and then we can get this equation, and then accordingly this multiplicity can be calculated, and then we can expect. And then again, the peak intensities are again we can interpret, or we can understood in terms of Pascal triangle or the binomial expansion coefficients. Okay, 1 plus x plus 1 plus x to the power n. So binomial expansion. So those coefficients will give you the peak intensities. Okay. So when you draw, suppose in the examination pattern, if at all you have to draw a triplet, that means you have to draw the first line with some intensity, whatever you think of. But then the middle one intensity must be double of the first one, and then the last one. That's a triplet. Okay, and you can see 1 is to quartet, but 1 is to 3 is to 1. So this intensity, the middle line intensity must be 3-fold of the outer lines. That's how you should draw. And in the case of pentet, the middle lines should have the 6-fold intensity as compared to the outer line. Okay, and then inner 2 lines will be 2. Will be 4-fold. So such a way one should draw that. And coupling constants are basically independent of the applied field strength, as we discussed, and coupling constant can also be negative. It's not the case that you only get the positive. And these are some of the general coupling patterns we come across in the NMR spectroscopy. Okay, so suppose you have a system. Okay, so a proton is found adjacent, it finds one particular proton, then we see a doublet. It's a very simple thing. Suppose if a proton sees a 2 HA proton, and please remember that I have only drawn here that this one, and only this pattern, NMR splitting pattern, is only with regard to the HA. Okay, so HA has 2 neighbors, therefore it will see a triplet. Now the question is, for HB, these HB are identical, and it has got 1 HA. So what will be the NMR spectrum of HB proton? Will it split or not? Yes, definitely it will split. So it will split into a doublet. So HB protons will be a doublet. Okay, so most of these patterns are only with regard to HA. Okay, the other one definitely it will be there. We are not interested in that. So in this case, third case, HA, it has either side, the identical one. So again we get the triplet. And then suppose HA has got 3 methyl substituent like this, we can get the quartet. And this is one possible situation where we get the quintet. So one side you have a 2 nuclei, and then the other side you have 1 nucleus. So altogether you have 3. No, sorry. So this is a quartet. I mean, so only one side you have a methyl group, and this one you can have it 2 plus 1. 2 plus 1 is 3, but then when it comes to the multiplicity, so it will be a quartet. So HA has got one side 2 protons which are identical, and there is another proton which is C on the other side. So this is 1 and this is 2, 3. Okay, so n is 3. If n is 3, it should be a quartet. So this is again a quartet. Okay, this is also a quartet. Then septet. So in this case, it has got the middle CH proton has got both sides 2 methyl groups. So we see a septet. So 7 lines that we see. Okay, so this is especially true for the isopropyl group. This kind of feature we normally come across. Okay, and other possible situations are listed are here. That okay, you have a one proton and one carbon. The other carbon, that the protons can be a different one. Okay, so the proton can be a different one. I mean that these protons can be one proton. So when HA interacts with HB, it gives a doublet. Okay, and when HA interacts with HB dash, again it gives another doublet. So this we normally represent with DD. Okay, so DD. So DD means a doublet of doublet. Okay, and then similarly HA. Again, the interaction, if the extent of interaction is different, so we can get sometimes a triplet also. Okay, and this is another possible situation where DD, again a doublet can be obtained. When but one side one proton, the other side is another proton. This is quite similar to this one, but this doublet and this one, here you have on one carbon atom, which is adjacent to HCl carbon atom, is two different protons are there. In this case, you have two protons again, but one side one carbon atom one, and the other side carbon atom one. Therefore, we get a doublet of doublet again. Okay. Similarly, we can have a different situation: doublet of a triplet and doublet of a doublet. So doublet of a doublet of a quintet. So these are different possible patterns that normally we come across. But as I told you, that most of the cases that these are very complex situations. We don't encounter in a routine NMR experiments, but in the case of researchers who are really working on the total synthesis, where they derive different molecules, different configuration, different active molecules. So those cases, they do see this kind of patterns, and based on this coupling interactions and then splitting pattern and measuring the coupling values, so uh, people used to people used to assign the structure. Okay,
Sir,
so oh, yeah, tell me.
in molecule number 7, why one is designated as HB, another is HB dash? Are they different?
Yeah, it is possible. There are certain molecules where here it is a here this depends upon this linkage. It depends upon this linkage. This kind of molecules are also possible. As we work on problems, this type of molecules are also possible. Depends upon the configuration. Whether it is a doublet, whether it is a double bond or not. That depends upon that. Suppose if it is a double bond, then definitely it is possible. One is a 6 and the other one is 5. So it's a situation that this kind of things are possible.
Okay, sir.
So,
Yes.
so among these two peaks, so the next slide. Which one occurs more often, the DD or the triplet one?
You are talking about the right side one or left side one?
So seventh number, 7
Okay.
and 8.
So it depends upon this condition. This I did not discuss with you. Okay, I purposefully skipped that. It depends upon the interaction. Okay, if JAB interaction is more, okay, and in this case this will CA1 doublet. Okay, so the thing is that you have one nuclei, and on the adjacent nuclei you have another two nuclei. It's not one nuclei, but both are different. Okay, so when these two interact, you get a one doublet. Okay, it is n plus one rule. Similarly, when this and this interact, you will get another doublet. This is what the meaning is of one doublet and another doublet. Is it? So this happens. This actually, when we see suddenly, sir, how it is possible? Like that we think, but then there are molecules. Probably we will work on problems. That time you come to know that this type of doublets. Okay? So it depends upon the interaction, what kind of subtweens are attached here, and then what kind of bonds are between this carbon atom. There are many factors. It is not a very rare thing that we come across. It's not a very routine thing that we come across this type of splitting pattern. So on the right hand side, whatever I showed you is not very routine, but these are very routine. Whatever we see, these are very routine. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, right. So with this, we have come to a discussion of chemical and magnetic equivalence. Okay, chemical shift equivalence as well as the magnetic equivalence is very, very important subject. As I told you that we will start with the discussion of the non-equivalent nuclei only will get interact. A nuclei, if it is having a non-equivalent nuclei on the adjacent carbon, adjacent neighboring nuclei, then there is a possibility they get interacted and then the fine structure we come across, right? Right. So if you have a CH3 group, just we discussed that these are all equivalent. Then these chemical shift values will be same and identical. They don't split, right? But they will split only with the adjacent carbon protons. For example, if here there is a proton and here there is a proton. So now they start interacting, these protons interacting with this, and then we see the splitting. Or similarly, is the true that if both are seem to be same, a proton is a proton, right? But in principle, they resonate at different thing, and then they resonate at different positions, and their chemical shift values will be different. Okay, if the chlorine atom is not there, then all are said to be identical. But there is a chlorine, then these protons will resonate at different positions, meta and R2 and then para protons, and as a result, we get a different piece. So the spin-spin coupling, there are two topics which are very important: chemical and magnetic equivalence. So let us try to understand what exactly is the chemical shift equivalence, and then what exactly is the magnetic equivalence. So all the non-equivalent protons get interact and they will split into individual protons. So that is what we learned so far is the spin-spin coupling. And when it comes to the chemical shift equivalence, there are two nuclei are said to be equivalent with regard to the chemical shift, with regard to their chemical shift, provided they follow these conditions. What are those? If those two protons, I have in my system, let's say two protons are there, and these two protons, I call them as a equivalent protons when the nuclei are when the two nuclei are the interchangeable, okay, interchangeable by the symmetry operation. For example, like the rotation and then immersion, reflection, and higher order symmetry. Only then I say those protons are said to be equivalent with regard to the chemical shift. So in a broader way, we call it as a chemical shift equivalence. Okay, and just look at this molecular structure. This is a propane. This is a propane, and it has got symmetry axis, right? And these two protons and this proton. So how many signal that you get it? So this HB is concerned that it has got a methyl group on one carbon, right side the carbon atom, and another methyl group on the carbon atom. So identical. So there you can see that these two methyl groups can be basically interchangeable, right? So they can be interchangeable. Therefore, we say that they are identical and then they are equivalent protons, chemical equivalent with regard to the chemical shift. Similarly, that you have a plane in the case of aromatic benzene. Okay, so all these protons are equivalent. Okay, so all these protons will resonate only at one place. Okay, whereas in this case also one place, there is no other distinction. All the HB protons will split into how many? So these are three. Splitting is different. Please remember that splitting is different. Splitting, if you want to measure that three nuclei, so total 6 plus 1. So you will see is a separate for the HP, at one place, septet. Okay, so that is different. But these two, this methyl and this methyl, both will resonate at one place. Why? Because both are having only one neighbor, that is Hb. So they will resonate at one place. So these methyl group, methyl group of protons are said to be equivalent protons. Similarly, the benzene ring. Benzene ring is also the same. And then again, you can see the cyclopropan ring. Okay, again, these protons can be interchangeable with the inversion symmetry or the plane of symmetry. Therefore, again, they are said to be equivalent. Okay, so the chemical shift equivalence comes into the picture that you have to have two nuclei of the same kind, and if you want to call them as a equivalent protons with regard to the chemical shift, they should have the same, they should resonate at one place, okay, and at the same time that the protons should be interchangeable with any of the symmetry operations like rotation, inversion, and plane of symmetry, and the higher orders rotation followed by reflection, right? So these are the rules really govern the chemical shift equivalence. And there are certain cases where we do say if the nuclei are interchangeable by a rapid process, then again we will see the chemical shift equivalence. And the best example in the previous class, we discussed the rotation, uh, restrictive rotation concept. When I discussed the concept of the cyclohexane. So cyclohexane, the equatorial axial protons are there, so they get basically rapidly exchanged between one form, both to the chair form. As a result, in the normal situation, that we don't see any distinction between the axial and the equatorial protons. However, if you lower the temperature, then it is possible that you can find the difference between the axial and equatorial protons. Okay, but if you are at the room temperature or the higher temperature, you can still say that the axial and equatorial protons are equivalent because they are rapidly changing, and you don't see two different NMR peaks, right? They resonate only one place. You see two different peaks only when you lower the temperature. So as long as you are at the higher temperature, you can say that they are equivalent. Okay. Similarly, the rapid exchange. If you have this kind of amide uh, molecule, then again the CC bond rotation is single bond. CC single bond rotation is very fast, and again we see that we don't see a difference between the protons, and as a result, again we get the same chemical shift value for the protons, right? So these protons actually, these other protons, okay, these other protons will not split. So you will see a one peak, but when you lower the temperature, this CC bond rotation will be lowered. As a result, one can get the two different peaks. Okay, so if two nuclei, please remember that if two nuclei are said to be equivalent, okay, they should be the same kind, and their chemical shift value. They must be interchangeable with any of the symmetry elements like rotation, reflection, and so on and so on. Then we say such a nuclei are chemical shift equal.
Sir, if in cyclohexane the 2H interchange is very rapid, then why you will get two different signals for the axial and equatorial rainbow?
No, if the chair and boat forms are there, right?
Yes,
Chair and boat forms are there, right?
yes.
If you somehow block that rapid conversion, okay, then it is possible. How can you stop it? By lowering the temperature or by by placing the cyclohexane in a very rigid environment. That is possible. Am I answered your question?
Yes, sir.
No, what is your doubt actually?
I am asking that if the axial and equatorial exchange is very rapid,
Hmm.
in the previous PPT, we have seen that we will get signals for axial and equatorial high rainbow.
That is at low temperature, I said.
It means we are
Okay.
just freezing the molecules so that the exchange can be lower, not
Yes,
rapid.
yes. I mean, suppose you are walking on a plain road, and then you just imagine that I throwed you in a You know that there are some places people do that mud bath. So I throw you in a very mud, very. Can you walk properly?
Very slowly.
So it is the same thing. So molecules cannot rotate as it expects. Temperature is the main responsible person, right? The temperature is a thing that you are giving more acceleration. Accordingly, the molecule gets converted from one form to the other form. So in the case of cyclohexane, that's what. So these are a couple of other examples for the chemical shift equivalents that you can imagine that this is the acetylene. There is a plane of symmetry. This is another one, the dichloroethane, then fumaric acid, so inversion of symmetry, and then axis of symmetry, and again the cyclopropane axis, and then so different symmetry elements that you can place it and see whether you are able to exchange the proton and see whether you are getting the different configuration or not. If you are getting a different configurations, then definitely you say that they are non-equivalent. If you are getting the same configuration, we say that they are equivalent. Those protons are equivalent. Okay, you can just do the some substitution. Maybe you can just replace with some other element which is not there, and then just see. Okay, so any possible symmetry element, if you are able to exchange and if you are able to get identical structures, then we say those protons are equivalent protons. If you are getting a different structures, then we say those protons are chemical shift non-equivalent. Okay. Right. So that is the definition and the discussion about the chemical shift equivalents. And the chemical shift equivalent will have the same resonating frequencies, okay, and they do not split with each other. But if you have a neighboring thing, definitely they will split, okay, and they give a single NMR signal. And certain nuclei are said to be chemical shift chemically as well as the magnetically equivalent if they couple equally with the third nuclei. However, if possible for nuclei to become chemical shift equivalent, but magnetically inequivalent. So what I'm saying is that the nuclei which are chemical shift equivalent can be magnetically equivalent. Can be magnetically equivalent. What do you mean by magnetically equivalent? So this is we will discuss under this topic. So magnetic equivalent means that okay, in the molecular structure that there are two molecules. If they are said to be magnetically equivalent, then you just imagine that there is a third nucleon. There is a third nucleon, and if these two initially taken protons, initially taken nuclei are coupling with each other in the same fashion with the third one, then we say it is a these two nuclei are basically magnetically equivalent. Okay, and if they are not interacting, if they are interacting differently, then we say magnetically non-equivalent. Okay, so these are slightly close terms, but there is a clear difference between chemical shift equivalence as well as the magnetic equivalence. In the case of chemical shift equivalence, so you need to have a same nuclei, and they should give the same chemical shift. They should resonate at one place. They should resonate at one place. Okay, and then how do we actually know that two nuclei are chemical shift chemically equivalent and they are resonating at one place, and you can apply the symmetry rules, and then if you are getting the same molecular structure, you say equivalent, otherwise not. Okay, but when it comes to the magnetically equivalent, we have to consider a little more. Okay, so the two nuclei are said to be magnetically equivalent. First, they are actually chemically equivalent. Chemically equivalent means they are exchangeable, okay, by a plane of symmetry or axis of symmetry or inversion or rotation followed by reflection. Any of the symmetry elements, they are exchangeable and chemically they are equivalent. And provided, and they also interact with the neighboring proton, third nuclei equally. Okay, so let me take an example and then explain to you so that you will understand in a better way. So let me take this example. These two protons, you can see there is a clear-cut plane, right? So these two protons are resonate at one same place, HB and then HB, For the sake of purpose, I just given different notation, but both are protons, and both will resonate at one place. Okay, so they are their chemical shift equivalent. Okay? No doubt at all. Now, if these two protons interact with the HA in the same fashion, then we say these are magnetically equivalent. Okay, so these are also magnetically equivalent. Otherwise, we don't say. Okay, now how do we say? So how do basically what I'm saying that okay, these two are said to be magnetically equivalent when their coupling constant with the third one. Okay, this with the HB with this one is same as the HB with this one. Okay, that's a mathematical representation I have given. Okay, or you can take this also an example. Suppose HB interact with the HA dash and then HB dash interact with the HA dash in the same fashion. We say these two protons not only chemical shift equivalent but also magnetically equivalent. Okay, so that's the definition or the explanation of the magnetic equivalence. So the chemical shift protons are just based on the chemical shift values. Equivalency is basically based on the chemical shift values. However, in the case of magnetical equivalence, it is much beyond that. So what is that? That is the coupling constant. Two protons are said to be magnetically equivalent, provided they are chemically equivalent. Okay, they satisfy the first condition, chemical shift equivalence, and also they have the same coupling constant. Another example, just you can take it. Okay, so these are in this case these are the real examples. So these are these two protons Hb and Ha are said to be equivalent, are said to be chemical shift equivalent, but not magnetically equivalent because they interact with this one and they interact with this one in a different fashion. Why? Because you can see here that these two protons are separated by 3 bonds, and the other case this is separated by 5 bonds, 4 bonds. So their coupling constants are different. Therefore, even though they are chemical shift equivalent, but not magnetically non-equivalent. Okay. Similarly, is the case the difluorine molecules, 1,1-difluoro acetylene, ethylene molecule. You can see here that there are fluorine. Fluorine 19 is a half-spin nuclei. Okay, fluorine 19 is a half-spin nuclei. It is a magnetically active nuclei. So this interact with, for example, you concentrate here. So this interact with this proton, and this interact also with this proton. Okay, okay. So these two protons are first of all these two fluorines are chemical shift equivalent. Why? Because fluorine is a fluorine, and they resonate at one place. There is no doubt. But when it comes to the interaction, so this will have a one type of interaction. This will have a. This is basically a cis type of vicinal coupling, and this is a trans coupling. So cis coupling and trans coupling is different, right? So their coupling constant will be different. Similarly, you can also take the other example, like you have two protons here, and their interaction with this one. Okay, so those are also you can take an example and then explain it. So another example, cyclopropane rings, and in this case, these two protons also chemically they are equivalent, but then magnetically they are different. Okay. These are some of the examples. Again, in the case of disubstituted benzene with a different substitution, the para positions, again we have this one. Okay, so these two protons are basically said to be, these two protons are equivalent. HA and HA dash, both are chemical shift equivalent. They resonate at one place. Okay, but they interact with differently. So the HA interaction with the HB is different. That is J3, and then HA dash, and that is J5. HA dash and B5. This interaction is different. You can also explain in terms of HB, and this interaction with is different. This interaction with is different. So that please remember that. Okay, so chemical shift equivalence and magnetic shift equivalence are the very important topics. So with this, I think I will stop here for today, and then we can learn a few more things in the next class. And if you have any questions, probably I can take. Yes.
Can you go to the third last slide?
This one?
No. Yes, this. Sir, this 3 number, is it the number of bonds between the atom?
Correct.
Sir, A dash and B. Between A dash and B, there are 4 bonds, I think, or it is 3.
Which one?
A dash and B.
Which molecule you are talking?
The benzene, the leftmost molecule.
Okay, the dichlorobenzene. You are saying that.
Yes,
See,
yes.
so A B. So this is the interaction I am talking about. Okay, this is a 3 bond. A dash B.
Yes.
This is 1, 2, 3, 4 bond. This is a 4 bond.
So why the 3 is written?
Yeah, it is mistake. Yeah,
Okay.
this coupling is different. Yeah. So the couplings, it is number of bonds. This one is the number of bonds.
Sir, is there any range of values of J coupling so that we can understand that it is like 3 bond away or 5 bond away or like that?
That we discuss in the next class. What are the general values? Since you asked, I can give the values. So it can go from. It depends upon, as I told you, that many parameters. So what are the parameters that influence how the coupling is affecting by various parameters that we discuss in the next class. But typically, the coupling constant can go from few tens of hertz to minus hertz also. It's like it can go to some 20, 25 hertz to -4, -5, something like that. So that is the typical range of coupling constants.
Okay, sir.
It varies between those numbers usually, but there are always some exceptions in that. That is for the carbon, and then again, if you are talking about the that is for the proton, and if you are talking about the carbon and the proton, those coupling constant will be different. So, as I told you, the coupling constant depends upon the nuclear number of bonds and various other parameters. So we have to be very precise, and just like that, we can't say it is a J. So it is a 3JHH or 3JCH, so or NH. So these are all the